Hi, welcome to my video. I'm going to be talking about civil disobedience. Is it justified and on what conditions? This is for my final project on philosophy, my philosophy class. Let's learn what justice is first to have a basic understanding on what it is, what types, what forms, in order to understand the next slides. What is justice? Is there only one type of justice or perspective? The basic definition of justice is the quality of being fair and reasonable, but there are different forms, perspectives, and ways how justice is perceived. So the types we can have as an example is economic, criminal, civil, and the perspectives would be as examples justice as a quality, need-based justice, and merit-based. This slide I'll explain here this slide about the types of justice, where economic, this form of justice that involves itself with social justice and welfare economics. So it talks about what's fair in corporations, unions, and wealth. And then we have criminal, which involves lawyers, defendants, people that say they didn't break the law, and are defended by lawyers and judges and anything to do with criminal. Different perspectives to justice. The picture on the right shows three people and each person has a different perspective. And this could be symboled as justice as equality, need-based justice, and merit-based justice. Justice as equality says the belief that everyone should get the same kind and amount of stuff, but need-based justice as a different perspective is everyone shouldn't get the same because our needs aren't the same, and merit-based justice actually means giving unequally based on what each person deserves and what they really work for. For example, on merit-based justice, it would be a person who works 8 hours and works for $10 an hour would receive more than a person who works for $10 an hour but 6 hours. Each person gets what they deserve because it's what they worked for. Here's a link to a video from Crash Course on YouTube, which explains better and helps me and probably you have a better understanding, if needed or wanted, about justice and the forms of it. Now that we know the simple basics of justice, we can move on to our problem, which involves civil disobedience, which is refusal to obey governmental demands or commands, especially as a nonviolent and usually collective means of forcing concessions from the government. This definition was from the Merriam-Webster, but you could also just Google it yourself. Forms of civil disobedience would be walkouts, sit-ins, product or service boycotts, blockades, unofficial marches, occupations, debt refusal, and protests. A very known and famous civil disobedience example would be the Greensboro sit-in, which involved young African Americans in the 1960s staged a sit-in at a segregated Woolworth lunch counter, so at a cafe that said only whites or only blacks and would not accept the blacks, sitting at the counter or in the restaurant itself, and the young African Americans refused to leave after being denied service by sitting in, and the movement soon spread to college towns throughout the South, so many of the protesters were arrested for trespassing, disorderly conduct, or disturbing the peace. Their actions spread and forced other cafes to accept blacks or change their policies that were racist, really. And what conditions need to be met in order for civil disobedience to be allowed and acceptable? So Rawls, who is a famous philosopher in the 20th century, says to target serious and long-standing injustice and at the same time appeal to widely accepted principles of justice, to be undertaken as a last resort, and to be done in coordination with other minority groups with similar grievances. How justice is connected with civil disobedience? It would be as justice and civil disobedience are connected when one is in violation of the rights and fairness of people, where if the people aren't heard after several tries to the government, who are supposed to hold justice fair and true, then the people will be forced to take matters into their own hands in civil disobedience protests. Civil disobedience today examples would be Colin Kaepernick kneels, the Abolish ICE movement, the Women's March, and Day Without Latinos. For example, Colin Kaepernick kneels. This famous NFL player would kneel during the national anthem in response to the injustice and suffering on African Americans in the United States. And moving on is, why should we care? Why should you care? The reason why we should care at all is because this involves us and our future. We should learn how to have civil disobedience protests in which we should not try to have any destruction or deaths on our hands, and it's a peaceful way to let the government know that we are still here, and that if there's no justice carried, then we should protest for our justice. Thank you all so much for watching this. You guys have a good day.